We'll kick things off. So welcome to Flowcode's Magic of Design webinar. You are joined by your hosts. My name is Corinne, and we are joined by Lillian, who's a product manager and previously the head of our design team. So she's very knowledgeable on the subject. As we walk through all the different points of the meeting, feel free to drop in any questions in the chat bar or in the Q&A box. We will be reserving all questions till the end in an open Q&A section. So feel free to drop them in as we go through, but we're starting out with noteworthy 2022 codes, going into some case studies, Flowcode anatomy, so all the different pieces of the code, best practices, and then, as I mentioned, the Q&A at the end. So some noteworthy codes that created in 2022. Here you can see a bunch of the designs our team has created, and what they do is take logos, you can see them at the center, as well as other brand guidelines and assets that these companies have, and they make beautiful codes for them. And these codes can be used for as many different codes as you want. They're technically a template, so all of them will look and feel the same to the naked eye, but the data points will be different and scanned to different things based on where you choose to send the scanner. So as you can see, they do a great job of infusing your brand into them. One of my favorites is this 3 wishes one that goes on the actual boxes of the products. So these are available with your Pro and Pro Plus accounts. You get one artist design code with all of them, and they just do an amazing job. Lillian, do you have any other points to add on here?
Yeah, I think we'll go through some of these later in the presentation and just show you guys kind of the best way to implement some of these codes. I think some of these are a great example of, some of the more detailed codes that we can do, but we'll also go into some different options for packaging, large screens, different printed options that you can do to really optimize and make sure that you're providing a really good scan experience for everyone that comes across your codes.
Amazing. And 2, just going into some case studies. So one of our codes is being used at the Lyric Theater here in New York for Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. You can see that this really enhances the experience for people who attend this show because they're able to order food right from their seat. They're also able to order merchandise. Here on the right is an example of the codes on the backs of the seats. So you don't even have to get up for it. Flow codes were attributed to a 48% lift in revenue per show. And you could see that the conversion rate was 27%, which is amazing. And you know which scans and which people were responsible for that conversion. So you can then attribute it to the code saying, look at how much engagement this got and look at how much revenue we can get from it. So then you can calculate that ROI. But again, that code is really great because it is an extension of that experience and it allows you to infuse the Harry Potter brand into it. We then saw Flowcode used at the Bro-Am Festival, which is a charity event, and Flowcodes were all over the place. You can see there was a big code on the screen here. They were also at the different stands throughout the festival so that you could scan to donate, scan to purchase different things, and just really enhance the event experience. You could see 3 times more donations using that flow code, $12 per scan, and then up 350% from the previous year. So here's a little quote from the foundation director of Switchfoot and the Bro-Am Foundation, Josh Bergner, who just could not rave enough about Flowcode and how much it helped increase revenue and just donations in general. And it's just a great way, again, to have that infusion of the brand rather than it just being a generic QR code. We'll also talk about other ways to call attention to the codes and different ways to place them around the events or your stores, just so that it's getting the most engagement and it's the most successful that it can be. And I will pass it over to Lillian for Flowcode Anatomy.
Perfect. So I think one of the most important parts that sometimes gets forgotten when we're talking about the design of these codes is how functional they really need to be, right? So you're getting a QR code because you want someone to have access to some other kind of information that you're trying to hand off to them. So I'm going to go over some of the parts of the code that actually make it really functional before we even get into any of the design options. So on this code, you'll see there's a couple of different pieces. Those 3 squares that you see, those are what we call the eyes. There are 3 eyes in each code. They're always going to be in that sort of L orientation, but they can be rotated in different ways. Those eyes are what the phone is truly looking for when it's going to scan the code. Those eyes mark out, hey, this is a QR code, and tell the phone what to look for. From there, it can start to look at the data points, which are the circles in this case. Those data points tell the phone where to go for the destination. In our case, that could be a URL, it could be a PDF, it could be one of our flow pages. There are really tons of different options for where we can send the code. And our codes are dynamic. So if you want to print this code and decide, right now I'm going to send it to, flowcode.com, for example, but then later after I print it on my packaging, I want to release a special video on my Instagram, you're able to do that without the actual data points changing. So you can actually have a dynamic code that changes whenever you want from our site. Some other options that we have on here are a logo. You're able to put a logo in the center of your code without interrupting the scan quality. And then a border. So in that border, you're going to see that scan the flow code on the outside. This is what we call our call to action. We have found that having a call to action around the code is a really great way, around the code or near the code somewhere else on your packaging, on your print, etc., is a really great way to tell the customer, here's where this code is going to go. As we become more familiar with codes in the real world, we find that less people are kind of scanning for fun and they really want to know where that code is going. It adds a certain level of trustworthiness to you if you let people know where that code is going to go before they scan. And then following up with that trustworthiness, our privacy smile is included on every code. It should always be visible and legible, and this just really ensures that everything is privacy compliant.
And Lillian, calling out the privacy smile as well, just to let everyone know, this is included in all of our codes, no matter if you're free or basic, pro, enterprise. And this is to let people know that we aren't taking that personally identifiable information. So it's really that lock of security, saying, letting your customers know that their data is secure and we're not taking it involuntarily, which I think is great because you don't get that with other QR code providers.
Perfect. And then we're going to go over 4 main things. The rest of this presentation, we'll go over some best practices and then show you some examples. First of all, there's some really important pieces here. So there's flow code size. You really want to make sure that your code is as large as possible and draws the eye wherever you're placing it. You want to have a call to action with your code. If you have a user group that is not super familiar with your QR code, or you're really integrating it into your design somewhere where it's kind of hidden, maybe you add some education to it. So maybe a camera icon next to it, or maybe like a hand with a phone showing that you can scan the code. So that would be an example of an education there. And then, you can also do one-to-one code placement. So this would be an example of sort of a more detailed way to get information about who's scanning where. So if you have, 14 posters across the city, you might want to do a different separate code for each one of those so you can get information about each of those different areas. We can go to the next. Here are some examples of some educational icons that we like to use. You can see here there's different levels of information. Sometimes a scan me right next to the code might be all you need. Sometimes you might need some more instructions. It really depends on what your user group is like, and how you're expecting them to use the code. Call to actions. So again, building into that trustworthiness, having a design that matches your branding, matches the persona of your company, and then also has a clear call to action, is going to be really important for getting the results that you want. We find that a call to action that offers urgency is the best for getting sort of higher scan rates. So that scan to win, scan for a discount, scan for something free are going to be how you get lots of sort of high volume of code scans. That might not be what you need for your company. This might be more of a information distribution code where you're saying scan to get our schedule, scan to know when we're open again. So it's really just going to be dependent on what you need that code for, but telling people where they're going to go is really important.
Yeah, and going back to the pro codes that are offered and pro plus codes, you can have this included in the design, but also in the dashboard itself. When you're creating the code, you can add in the text around it yourself, so you don't have to worry about having it input in those codes. You can also create them in the generator itself with the call to action, or even in the center of the code, not necessarily with the designs, but with the ones that you're generating in the dashboard itself.
In terms of placement, you always want to be testing and thinking about, how is the user coming across this? So if you have a banner that's hanging somewhere at eye level, you might want to place that code in the center of that placement, just so that it's really easy to scan. If you have sort of an A-frame that's sitting on a sidewalk somewhere, if you have a code at the bottom of the page, kind of on the left, that's going to be really difficult for somebody to scan as they're walking by, and they might not take that effort. Something we like to say here is that you can't accidentally scan a code. So you really want people to make that effort and scan it. So if you can place it as large as possible where somebody can easily grab that without having to zoom in, squat down, really making it as easy as possible is going to help you get the best experience possible. If you can make the code take up 25% of the placement as well, we see that really integrating the code into your design helps to build that trustworthiness again around the code, and let people know that this is a really thought out execution, and there's going to be something on the other end of this that they want to see. This kind of plays right into that with the sizing. You want to just make sure, you can have a little bit of a smaller code if somebody's going to be sitting there with a magazine, but if you're placing it on TV, you might want that code to be much larger, just to consider, somebody that's scanning from 10 feet away, 6 feet away. Really just planning and testing that out is your best course of action there.
Yeah, and you bring up testing, which I think should be commonplace when you're using a code, no matter on packaging or just out in the real world. Like, testing that before you print it in large quantities is so important. Just making sure that the size is large enough. We recommend at least 1 inch in diameter of the circle, just to ensure that if it's on your packaging, especially, that your phone can recognize it as a code and actually scan those different data points.
And then we have about 2 more slides of this, and then we'll get into some examples of what we've done in the past. So this is a great example of a print placement. Where can you place this code that is going to be super visible to the user, but also integrated into your design? So we have it here mocked up on this can of pale ale. You can see that we've designed the code background to match like the background of the can. So this is something where if you came to us and said, here's my packaging, we'd be able to take that packaging and make you a code that matches that packaging, matches all your colors. And then we can actually test it and make sure that it's going to scan well across a whole range of phones, from iPhone, Android, international phone, because those all do scan very differently. We can also change up the style of code and give you different recommendations on the data point, whether or not to include a logo, all those sorts of things. So we're really here to help you out and make sure that you have a super successful program.
Yeah, and Lillian, you talk about the scanning process to make sure that it is scannable. And I think that's so important to emphasize because not every QR code company does that. But here at Flowcode, we try and make sure that all codes that we put out into the world are scannable so that you're not getting a product that doesn't work and is a broken experience. So again, all those custom designs go through this quality assurance process, as well as the ones in the generator. You'll note that if you choose a lighter color, it automatically defaults that to the background and makes the data points darker. So there's that contrast between them and the phone can read it, which I think is really great.
And then lastly here, just kind of talking about screen size. Again, we find that on TV, this is a place where you really want to make sure that your code is integrated into the spot and called out. You want to make sure that it's up for a long enough amount of time. This is something we see a lot where, the code might be the perfect placement, the perfect design, might have the perfect call out, but it's only up for 15 seconds. So again, that goes back to that testing. If you sit down and you're watching the ad that you've created, can you pull your phone out from your pocket and get your camera open and scan the code in the amount of time that it's up on the screen? Maybe you want to add a little warning in before, hey, get your phone out, and kind of incorporate it into your ad beforehand. This is, again, something that we can help you with and kind of make sure that you have an optimized code for the TV experience. And then this is a little example that we have of TV sizing, and just, again, making that code larger the farther you're going to be away from it. And now we will get into some examples, some different mock-ups, and then actual live examples of what we've done. This is an example of a code that we put on a Jumbotron screen at Red Rocks. This was a POAP drop. So kind of in the NFT crypto space. And we basically optimized this code to be super dense and dark, but still designed with this artist's aesthetic in mind. And it was a really successful environment. We had thousands of people scanning the code, got their phone out, were able to scan from super far away. But this did require testing to make sure that we can actually get this to work. But it's a great example of how we can actually make the code work in many different ways. So we can kind of click through some of the rest of these. This is a great example of a tabletop. You have this code here, it matches your branding, matches your logo, but it has that very clear scan to check in here. So people know this is exactly what this is for.
Yeah, and then it also has that call to action around the border, the scan to contact an agent too. So again, you have those two educational and call to action pieces, which I think together also just really tell the consumer what they should be doing and what they'll be getting after scanning it.
In this case, this is a great example of where you might not need a call to action. So if you have something on a piece of clothing, I think this is a really fun way to kind of use QR, and this is showing also one of our flow page designs. But if you have it on a piece of clothing, this is something where you are the call to action, right? If they're coming up to you and asking you about it, if you're showing it to them, you can talk about it. And this is a great, example of different kinds of placements and different ways that you might need to use your code. So sometimes, keeping a little mystery or just interacting with it in a different way is really fun, and kind of working it into all different aspects of your brand will also help to build that familiarity and trust with the code in your process. This is an example of one of those Wish cereal boxes that we were talking about before. Scan me to join our mailing list. So that's that super clear call to action where people know where it's going to be going. You have an example where you're using the icon logo in the center, so it's something a little darker and denser, and then you have their larger logo in the rest of the placement. You can see that the content here really works super well with the code. So you've got the hand and the cereal kind of working with it, and you can tell that this placement is all about the code. This is something that's super important for kind of, again, building that trust. Here's an example of a real estate mailer. Again, the code's really large, and then you've got that call to action, scan to contact page. Here is the actual cereal box. You can see that here. They have scanned to have your wish granted. So this is an example of something where, you know, if you're familiar with this brand, this is something where you would scan that to kind of like see what happens. And this is a great example of just, you know, trying out different call to actions. And actually all of their different cereals have a different code with different colors and different backgrounds that all match the branding. So it looks super refined, and it's not just a black and white QR code that's kind of been just thrown on at the end. Again, another sort of packaging example. You can see here that the call to action is a little more worked in. It's on the side of the code. But this is something where it's a large enough. You really want to make sure that it's not any smaller than an inch. Otherwise, it really gets lost and people just don't see it. Sometimes you might be able to work it in a smaller way if you just repeat it in different ways. Again, just kind of playing with it. And then here's an example of where codes can be used differently. So this is an example of a code that's been created as a template. So they were able to make a lot of different codes for different interactions. This initial code on the right was at the beginning of an event. So you could hear from the apartment therapy founder. And then on the left, you were able to follow specific people that had set up different parts of this event from a different code that was created from the same design. Here's an example of a super designed code that we created. So this code actually was like the full packaging for Knocking Point Wine. It's like a surfer that the illustration really kind of comes in and over the code. This is something that we worked really closely with them to create, but you can see that we can really create all sorts of different textures, colors, all those kind of things. And then we've got two more examples for you. This has been a really cool recent activation by the UFC. This scan to enter is really strong. And then we've also found that if you put a URL or wherever it's going to underneath the code, that's a great call out because people realize, hey, I don't want to type this in. Let me just scan the code to get there instead. And then lastly, we'll leave you off with this says scan for a free can. So again, if you can do anything to offer anything for free or some sort of reward, people are more than willing to scan that code and kind of trade off with you there.
Yeah, and Lillian, what you said about adding the URL or a phone number or just any indication on where the code might be bringing you to, it really removes that effort on the end user's part so that they don't have to type in that number. They don't have to type in the URL. And we've found in some instances, it's led up to 2 times the amount of engagement, which is a really great call out. And last but not least, we have our Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A box. But as we've discussed, you really can't go wrong when you are creating your code in the platform or having it done by our designers. We try to make sure that all those codes are scannable. It's just about how you implement them. So be sure to look at your sizing, where you're placing the codes, the calls to action, and the education around it, just to make sure that you're successful, because we want you to be, again, champions of our product and to have great experiences with it. But we'll give it a minute or two for anyone to write any questions about design or codes in general. That would be happy to answer. And if you stick around to the end, we do have a little thank you for coming to the webinar, but also want to reiterate that we have recorded this and we will be following up with the recording so that if you missed any of it or want to watch it again, you'll be able to access that on YouTube. We'll just wait a minute for any questions and give you a chance to actually scan this Flowcode if you want. As a thank you, you can submit for a chance to receive a $50 Starbucks gift card. I know Lily and I always joke, I'm like, I wish I could get the $50 gift card. Next, you can also try a free trial of Flowcode Pro with the code Flowcodes 13 days. And the link in that And that flow page should take you right there and automatically apply it. You can also join our Facebook Flowcode community to connect and collaborate with other users on how they're using Flowcode or ask them any questions. And then we also have creator spotlights that we feature in our newsletters and blogs at least once a month. So if you want to share how you're using Flowcode and get a little bit of a spotlight for our community, feel free to submit that. We welcome any and all stories. And we'll give it another second so you can either scan this, and this will be the only chance to win that Starbucks gift card so that we can verify that you attended. And then also ask any questions if you have any lingering thoughts. But Lillian, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate all your insights, and it looks like we have a Q&A. $25 gift card. This is actually a $50 gift card. So if it says 25 in the flow page, that is a mistake on our part, but it is $50. But thank you so much for joining. Lillian will also be helping host a webinar tomorrow on templates. So if you're interested in having a sneak preview of our template experience, new and improved, very customization friendly, feel free to join that one as well. But thank you again for joining us, Lillian. You are truly a design expert.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your days. Bye.